When's the last time someone told you you were too much, too intense, too demanding, too direct? You see these qualities as strengths, but they meant it as a criticism. So you think they just don't understand what it takes to build this company. And you might be right. From where you're standing, none of it feels like too much. It feels like what's required. But sometimes your strengths can work against you. And in this video, I'm going to show you how. Not to talk you out of what makes you you. That's what got you this far. But so you can catch yourself when your strengths aren't serving you, ideally before they cause damage. As an executive coach working with 1,000 founders, I've seen these patterns play out over and over. They cause talented people to leave, investors to lose trust, client negotiations to go south. And here's what makes it hard to catch. On the surface, they're qualities that you want. So you don't think to question them. You just have the same practiced response regardless of the situation in front of you because it's worked in the past. So this is not about changing the trait, the fundamental trait. It's about reading the situation and calibrating how you respond. So here's the first one. You're too mission driven. You know what needs to happen and you're going full force. How could that be anything but a strength? Well, here's what it looks like when it misfires. I was running a mental resilience training for a military special operations team, and they are, by definition, mission driven. So I was having them do a role-playing exercise so they could practice using influence in a safe environment. In this case, a sergeant asking for resources. So the operator playing a high-ranking official says, "I'm really busy." And the sergeant immediately replies, "Well, how about I come by at 4:30 this afternoon then?" And right there, in his mission-driven focus on getting sign-off on the resources he needed, he missed the chance to establish the rapport that could have paved a quicker path to what he wanted. Because even if it's the official's job to provide resources, nobody likes to be treated like an ATM machine. So the sergeant could have said, "Oh, right, I bet you're busy with the deployment," acknowledging the official's status, connecting with him as a human being. Or, "I know you've got a lot on your plate, but this will benefit the teams because," and then giving him the larger context. Instead, he went directly from point A to point B. Mission not accomplished. Now, here's the same instinct calibrated. The CEO founder I was working with was in a monthly call with his team, and they were running through the numbers, doing their thing. But even on Zoom, he could tell something was off in their eyes and the way they were presenting. And normally he'd say, "Why isn't this growing faster? What can I do to help?" And the call move on. This time, because of conversations we'd had about when he was too narrowly hyper-focused on the goal, he did something different. First, he pinged his CFO on the side. "Something's wrong here. I'm going to ask people how they're doing." But before I tell you what the CFO said and what happened, we need to talk about the second strength, the one that compounds being too mission driven, because it's the combination that trips founders up. And that is, you think too fast. You're always 3 steps ahead. Someone's still laying out the problem, and you're already thinking about the trade-offs, where it breaks, potential solutions. And of course, that's definitely a strength. But that kind of processing speed works mostly on information. It doesn't work so well on people and emotions. I remember talking with a CEO who was frustrated with someone on his team, and I asked, "Well, did you ask the team member what he meant when he said that?" And the CEO said, "No," taken aback, like he's wondering why he would ever do that. Or, "I already know what he thinks." And there it is. In your impatience to drive toward the target, you assume you know exactly what people mean or what they're about to say. So you interrupt or you tune out. And that's where you miss the nuance, the hesitation before an answer, the breaking of eye contact, the thing that would have told you your read was wrong before you made a decision based on it. You assume you know the answer, so you don't get curious. Ask clarifying questions like, "Can you give me an example of what's not working?" So back to that CEO's monthly review. 20 people on the call, and he says, "Let's pause for a minute. I want to ask how you're all doing." And then, in his words, I just listened and I made all of these notes. He went person by person. How are you feeling? And what came out was they were feeling stuck, like they were treading water, anxious, feeling like second-class citizens next to the team, getting all the action and the attention. And none of that was in the numbers. And all of it, at some level, was about him, the CEO, getting it wrong, which is why he couldn't get curious without putting some ego aside. That was the harder part, because the third strength is you're too strong. You think you need to have all the answers, come up with the solutions, never make mistakes, which means you don't ask questions you don't think you know the answers to. So when the CEO pinged his CFO before he paused the meeting, the CFO wrote back, if you do that, they're going to say they're not happy, and then they're going to need a solution, which is the fear, isn't it? You open Pandora's box and you're standing there with nothing. And so the CEO said, I know I can't give them an answer on the solution, but I can really just speak to them. So here's the thing. When you're trying not to look weak, you're actually giving up your power. You're letting other people's opinions dictate what you do. And Dave Cooper, former Navy SEAL, trained the top teams in the SEALs, says the most powerful words a leader can say are, I screwed up. Because what builds trust isn't having all the answers. It's asking the questions nobody else will ask, naming your own mistakes, especially when everybody already knows. After the meeting, the Slack messages started coming in. Thank you for being transparent. That was the most inspiring meeting I've ever been in. And one person wrote, I went in there wanting to quit. Now I get it. I understand. Thank you. The CEO told me it was the best conversation he'd ever had with his team. And they told him, you need to do this tomorrow at the all hands. And that's what gave him the nerve to do it again. This time at the all hands, 500 people, where he recognized out loud the team that wasn't feeling any of the excitement that everyone else was feeling. And he apologized for the stress it had caused. He traded looking like he had all the answers for stepping into uncertainty. And that's when people started giving him really valuable information, the truth. Being mission-driven, rational, in control, that's what makes an exceptional operator. But being someone people follow when the mission looks impossible and you can't promise it'll work, that's where emotional intelligence comes in. Zooming out from the target long enough to see the people standing in front of it. Being curious about what someone else is experiencing, even when you think you already know or you're afraid of finding out. Being willing to not always have the solution. That's what I call leadership range. It's a bit like mobility training. It doesn't change your actual physique, your build, but it increases your range of motion and your ability to execute. If you want to go further on expanding your leadership range, watch my video on finding your Goldilocks zone. I'll put it at the end. So here's the micro experiment. In your next one-on-one, listen for the moment someone says something that you assume you know what they mean. The team's frustrated. The project doesn't make sense. Then ask a clarifying question. Ask them what they mean when they say that. Then don't say anything until they finished. As with any experiment, the answer isn't good or bad. It's just data that helps you make better decisions. Until the next time, I'm rooting for you.